Alrighty, good evening, everyone. I hope that you've had a great day. I just want to go ahead and run through the biggest charts in 30 minutes. This is the daily market technical analysis wrap. And so let's just go ahead and let's get started here. Let me just make sure that my microphone is here and it's going to sound good. Let's do this, you guys. I want to go ahead and just make everyone aware of DeFiUniversity.xyz. I go live every night for the daily market wrap. It's our technical analysis call for 30 minutes every weekday. But I want you to do yourself a favor and head on over to the school community right now. The school community, DeFi University, is totally free. It's totally free to join. And if you're looking for higher levels of learning, we offer these private daily alpha calls in the school community. And there are one-on-one coaching programs if you really want to upgrade your DeFi skill set. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe so we can keep getting you notified and bringing you value. Now, let's hop into the charts. So why don't we start things off here with gold, because it's had a monster move, monster session today. Take a look. Let me zoom in. We're going to be zooming in on a lot of these charts today. So this was a huge dump in gold earlier this morning. So, what was this on a percentage basis? Let me go ahead and move this out of the way so we can see it. But just this one hourly candle was negative 312 points. So minus 5.6% in gold in an hour. This is a big, big move. And, on the way up, notice this. So gold dumped, and take a look at the S&P. The pattern looks kind of similar. The S&P dumped, spent the entire rest of the day getting back to even, trying to get back to even, but wasn't able to. Same thing with gold. So just interesting to see these assets move together like this. I do think that if it's true that traders and industrial users of this metal and other metals, if they are actually demanding physical delivery now, then we might not see gold crash back down to its 200-day or even 200-week moving average. We may not even see it come down to this trend line support, which is at $4,500. It's almost 800 points lower. So it depends on if it's true as to whether there's people out there demanding physical delivery. Let's check in with Bitcoin, because we've been talking about digital assets a lot over the last couple of months, and really for this live call, I just started this live call last week, so always want to make sure to check in on digital assets. And if we just start by zooming out, let's zoom out to a daily. We've been talking about this bear flag pattern on BTC, and it looks as though this bear flag is confirming. So confirming to the downside means that there's likely more downside ahead for BTC. And take a look at this. So when Bitcoin broke this level of support, you see this trend line support right here? When Bitcoin broke this level of support back, last Tuesday, actually that was just a couple of days ago. That was January 26th. So this is a daily. So here, Tuesday, January, that's the 20th. Got it. So Tuesday, the 20th, right? So when Bitcoin broke support on the 20th, it chopped around at support for a while, continued moving lower. But when it attempted the retest, let's just go ahead and zoom in so you can see this a little bit more clearly. Notice right here, Bitcoin got rejected at resistance, big rejection, put in this doji, and then dumped during the session today. So now that Bitcoin has dumped like this, I want to zoom out one more time. Let's zoom out to a weekly. And from the weekly, I think things become a little bit more clear. So on the weekly, it should be clear to everyone that we are just continuing on the way down. So we've got this bear flag here, and it's continuing lower. So I think that the next level of support for BTC comes in at 80K. And if that support fails to hold, which is my expectation, then I think Bitcoin moves to 75. I think that that is the next level of support for BTC. Now, if 75K does not hold, then probably Bitcoin moves to its 200-week moving average, which comes in right now at 58K. But if it takes a couple of months for Bitcoin to meander and make its way down to the 200-week moving average, well, the 200-week moving average will move higher. So maybe, by like May, June, like late spring, early summer-ish timeframe, we might see Bitcoin all the way down in the 60s. That's certainly what I expect. So let's just, see how this plays out. But this weekly pattern to me looks like Bitcoin broke support, is confirming the bear flag, retested the broken level of support, which became resistance, and now pushing back to the downside. So it looks as though you might see BTC just test that 80K region first before moving to 75, and then all the way down to maybe the low 60s, something like that. So, and even as we've been speaking, Bitcoin continues to move a little bit lower here. This is the daily. If we zoom in to the hourly, we can see, just retesting the lows that were put in earlier during the session today. So retesting those lows, if they break, then we probably see Bitcoin touch 80K, maybe even tonight. So let's see, here's ETH. ETH looking a little bit stronger over the last couple of hours, but very similar pattern if we start by zooming out to a daily. And so from the daily, take a look at that trend line support. And that is within the context of this bear flag. So this bear flag right there. And then trend line support. We got the break of trend line support, just like we did on BTC. Now, if I zoom in a little bit here and change this tool, there we go. So we got the break of support, chopped around at the level, just like Bitcoin did. And then on the move lower, the retest of what became resistance, this trend line became resistance when it broke. So the retest, ETH got rejected, big down day today, and it looks like we might get maybe a little bit of continuation to the downside, possibly. So if there's continuation, and if Bitcoin moves just a little bit lower and picks up some momentum again to the downside this evening, then we might see ETH move down to 26 like tomorrow. This could happen quickly. So 2600 is the next level of support for Ethereum. Fail that, and ETH moves to 21. So 2100. So that's what I see for ETH. I am short Bitcoin, I am short ETH, and I'm also short a handful of other altcoins. Now, take a look at Solana. Solana is continuing to move to the downside. Now, I was short Sol earlier in the day. I closed that trade for a profit, and now Sol is continuing to move lower on me. So, sometimes you close a little bit too early. And it looks as though now that this level has broken, this level of support has broken, I think the next target for Solana is $95. Now let's zoom out from that hourly to a daily. And from this daily, Solana's got to stay out of no man's land. So if you take a look here, this level of support at $95, that level, if it breaks, there's no support below that level. So you would enter like no man's land on Sol if that level were to break. So you better hope that that doesn't break. Now, take a look at the 200-day moving average, all the way up at $170. So Solana just getting crushed below its 200-day, breaking below support, and it does not look good here for Solana. Looks like this pattern continues down to 95. I probably need to reopen that short, to be completely honest with everyone here. I think this moved to 95 in a hurry. So let's actually zoom out even further. Let's zoom out to a weekly here. And when we zoom out to this weekly pattern, then you start to see the head and shoulders appear. And that head and shoulders is a very bearish price action pattern. That is very bearish. So I would expect Solana, honestly, I expect Solana to, over the next several months, move to at least 95 and probably even, down to like $30 or $40, something like that. That's kind of what I expect out of Solana. So this is a very bearish looking pattern out of Sol. Let's go ahead and take a look here at these handful of alts. I want to start with SUI. because SUI has broken that level of support that we were talking about just yesterday. So I'm short SUI, and now that that support has broken, well, I think that the next level of support really doesn't come in until, maybe like $1. That could act as some support. But really, better support is maybe the crash lows from October 10th, or like down here, something like 47 cents. So now that SUI has started to continue to the downside by breaking this level of support, I think probably the next stop is $1 and then 50 cents. So I'm just going to hold the short and allow it to play out. And then once I hit 1R in profit, I'll just roll up the stop and I will go ahead and add another R, another risk unit. So that is the plan here, to just let this continue and sit and do nothing. So SUI looks like it's got plenty of room left to the downside, maybe another 50 or 60% left to the downside. So SUI looks great as a short. Here's Link. Take a look at Link. So I'm short Link, and Link's pattern, this again looks kind of like a head and shoulders pattern. See this head and shoulders pattern? And the target for Link, look, the target is all the way down here at like $8. That's kind of like the zone from which Link broke out at the beginning of the bull cycle. But if Link breaks down to $8 and re-enters this zone, it probably ends up chopping around down here for a little while. So these altcoins, I think, are great opportunities on the short side. That's why I've put my money where my mouth is and entered all of these short trades. So Link, let's zoom in to an hourly so that we can just get a little bit more granular detail. So check this out. Support, 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 support. Oh, it broke. And the retest. So on the retest, you got resistance. So this level of support, when it broke, became resistance and held on the retest. And now we're getting this, backing off from that level of resistance. And the next level of support doesn't come in until $8. So, that could happen quick too. And now, as we speak, it's pushing lower. So Link probably has, I think it's probably got another 25% to the downside, something like that. And that could happen quick. And as we've just been speaking, Link is pushing to fresh lows here. So I expect it to move further to the downside. Let's take a look at AVAX. This is another altcoin that I am short. And on that breakdown, I got short, and it's continuing to move to the downside. Let's zoom out from that hourly to a daily. And here on the daily, this pattern, this high here is so much lower than this, didn't even make it up to trend line resistance. That's a sign of weakness. So, if we zoom in here a little bit, this little level of support, when that broke, that was my trigger to enter. That was my entry trigger. And if we just zoom in, this is a daily. So if we zoom in, you can see once, twice, there's the break, and we're getting some continuation. So if this accelerates, the next level of support is $8.50. So it's still got plenty of room to go on the downside, maybe another 20% or so on the downside, another $2.25 out of AVAX lower. I think that AVAX moves to $8.50 over the next couple of weeks. Let's take a look at XRP. XRP finally breaking down. Very happy that XRP is. I'm short, so I'm looking for downside out of XRP. And if we just zoom out here a little bit, I was marking that level of support yesterday, and on the breakdown I got short. So I think that there's more downside, at least to the Binance Wick lows from the 10th of October down at $1.27, $1.25 ish. So I think that's probably the next level that XRP heads to. And that's another 25, 27% lower from the current price for XRP. So I expect this to just continue to grind lower over the next couple of weeks, couple of months. But here's the thing though, now that XRP has broken down below this little level of support, I guess you could say that, You could move this even a little bit lower down here, but I mean, you've got very little trading activity here. So maybe you could create like a zone in here, but then you're just getting so generous with the chart that the levels of support don't really mean anything any longer. So I think that the real level is $1.27, $1.25, and I don't expect that to hold. So I think that this probably moves to like 60 cents ish, something like that. And then this zone, I can just, extend this to the left here. I think that this zone is where XRP heads to. Something between like 45 and 65 cents, something like that for XRP. So I'm short and I'm going to hold this short down to, I think it probably makes it first to $1.60. Could be there tomorrow. So that's kind of what I see out of XRP. Now let's move on to hype. Now, when we were talking about hype yesterday, I just drew this in a little bit. And so my expectation is that hype's big pump of 55% over just 3 sessions, that this pump, that it gives it back, that it gives it all back and then some. That's my expectation simply because, XRP and SUI put in similar pumps, gave it all back and then some. Here's SUI, big pump, gave it all back and then some. And so I expect hype to do the exact same thing. Big pump, give it all back. I think that the level of support for hype doesn't come in until all the way down at $20. So $20 for hype is probably the next target. I didn't get short this one, however. Um, look, Hyperliquid actually generates revenue. XRP doesn't make any money. SUI doesn't really make much money. AVAX doesn't really make much money. Link as a protocol doesn't really make much money, but Hyperliquid makes a ton of money, and they return those revenues to token holders. So I am not as comfortable getting short hype as I am getting short the other shitters like SUI, Link, AVAX, and XRP. And they really are shit coins. So let's take a look at Tau. I like the project. I like the Tau protocol. Very interesting project. But, this pattern doesn't look too hot. Notice we had this anchor point extended to this next higher low. That was the crash low. And Tau actually outperformed just about everything else during and after the October 10th crash. And so that level of support, when it broke, it became resistance. And notice right here how Tau hung out at that level of resistance for a little while before really pushing lower. And so now that Tau has started to push lower, if it breaks $207, if Tau breaks 207, I think it moves sharply to 170. And I mean, look, these things are so volatile that move could happen quickly. And I am unaware of any revenues generated by the BitTensor Tau protocol, but I'd be willing to bet that they're not as significant as what Hyperliquid generates in terms of real revenue. And also returning that real revenue to token holders, Tau is a much, much more complicated protocol. So as much as I like the idea of Tau, I do not like this pattern. And hey, if 170 fails to hold, if Tau gets down to 170, that would be, if we just number the number of tests. So once, and that was from all the way back in August of 2024, probably those yen unwind lows. And then we've got April of 2025, the tariff tantrum lows. If Tau gets all the way back down to 170 for a third time, it probably doesn't hold it. The more times you bang on the door of support or resistance, the more likely it is that door breaks. So either to the downside or the upside. And so here, if Tau gets back down to 170, that level probably won't hold. Just because it's the third test, it probably breaks. So once you get to the third and fourth test, it becomes much, much more likely that you see that level break. So if 170 gets broken, then, Tau is going to be heading all the way back down into like this zone down here between like $35 and $90. So that would be the zone that I would expect Tau to really find solid support at if 170 does not hold. But first, Tau's got to break below, a 207. So that's the first level of support, getting very, very close, but that's the first level. If that fails to hold, then I think the Tau would move down to, 170 or so. So let's see here. ETH, big move lower on ETH. Bitcoin down another $1,000 at 82,150 now. I wish I'd held on to that Solana short. Oh well, that's okay. Um, there's still plenty more room until $95 to get short Sol. We see the Nasdaq pulling back a little bit, the S&P pulling back a little bit from all-time highs, the Russell, putting in a little bit sharper of a pullback, but we still don't see volatility really bid. So that's the thing. If we see vol get bid, we need to see it get bid up above 20. And I would like to see vol get bid above 20 for more than a couple hours this time. So I'm looking for vol to push above 20 and probably up to like the low 20s. If we just get like a basic run-of-the-mill garden variety dip out of equities, I think that would be what crypto needs to push it a little bit lower. And I mean, look, we were talking about Bitcoin touching 80K like today or tomorrow, and it's very, very close as we speak. So the low from the session today is now 81,118. That's the Binance contract lows. And the lows from back at the end of November, that low was 8,600. So, 80,600. So I think that, look, unless you see some type of a big bounce come in, Bitcoin probably just continues down to 80. And ETH probably down to 2,600. Solana has a little bit more room to go, but I think 95 comes into focus quickly. We can take a look here at SUI one more time. So SUI continuing to the downside. SUI doesn't have much by way of support until $1, and then again at 50 cents. Link has broken support, continuing to push lower. I think Link moves down to $8. AVAX broke support, continuing to push lower, probably moves down to $8.50. XRP, again, support broken. And yes, there could kind of sort of be some support like around $1.60, but better support is at $1.25. I think XRP continues to move to the downside. If you take a look at something like, I don't know, we could start to look at like real shioters, like Pendle. I happen to really, really like the Pendle protocol, but there's no way that I would want to hold this token, especially since it's sitting in this zone. Now, don't get me wrong, I really like the Pendle protocol, but this zone of support, if I just throw down a horizontal there, like Pendle is within, just a couple of percentage points of like being at make or break levels. So this pattern here, if that $1.67 level gets tested and breaks, then Pendle would probably, look, all of this trading action might act as some level of support. I could throw a trend line down at $1.28, something like that maybe. But, you might actually be talking about a move down to the all-time lows for Pendle if it fails to hold $1.67. So that would be a move all the way down to 47 cents. And I guess you could say that there is kind of sort of some support on the way down. There's a lot of trading activity in here, I bet. In fact, why don't I just throw down volume on this contract? And look, I mean, it's not exactly like the majority of volume takes place here. Why don't I, instead of using just volume like that, let's see if it'll let me throw down a volume profile. Let's see. I know that I've got that profile favorited. Profile, volume, visible range, volume profile. Let's see if it'll let me do this. They want money. TradingView wants me to pay them. I want to be able to use TradingView for free. I don't want to pay for TradingView. I don't want to pay $60 a month for TradingView. But Pendle, because you don't need it. I throw down horizontals, I throw down trend lines, I use one moving average, and that's about it. Like, that's all you really need to be successful as a technical analyst. Like, you don't need a bazillion different indicators. You just need to be able to identify support, resistance, and trend. If you can do those three things, That's the skill set that you need. So Pendle, if it moves a little bit lower to $1.62, what is that in percentage terms? That's actually a big move. That's a 12% move or so. That could happen quickly though. So a little bit of a bounce coming in. Interesting to see that bounce. So let's see here. If we're taking a look at Pendle, well, then we might as well take a look at something like Athena. This is Athena's token, the governance token over there. And this, doesn't this remind you of something? This, pattern where the third high is well below the trend line resistance reminds me of AVAX. So this pattern here, see that? The third high well below trend line resistance. See the same thing over here in ENA, ENA, well below trend line resistance. And I mean, this is for all intents and purposes, basically an all-time low for the ENA token, or at least very, very close to it. So if you believe in the Athena protocol, then over the next couple of weeks, you'll probably have an opportunity to buy it for basically, the lowest prices on record. Take a look at something like EtherFi. Again, this is one of my favorite protocols. I really like Athena, really like Pendle, really like EtherFi. But these mechanisms by which revenues get returned to token holders are opaque at best much of the time. And EtherFi actually makes money. So this token here probably has some support here, right there at what is that? Like 42 cents. So 42 cents, on EtherFi looks as though that could be some support. But hey, you know what? During the flash crash on the 10th, it got down to 8 cents on Binance. So really, the better level is 8 cents. And it seems as though that is where EtherFi is headed. Let's take a look at some more of these alts. How about Aave? This protocol is a successful protocol, but this pattern, let's just throw down some trend line support, something like that. And it's sitting at support. So this trend line support, just push a little bit lower, and then all of a sudden we've got to start talking about $80. That's the Binance flash crash low for Aave, AAVE. Okay, what else do we have on the watch list here? How about Aerodrome with their Aero token? So sitting at 42 cents. Now, this is a reward token, and reward tokens tend to be extremely inflationary. And it's just a part of this, incentive scheme over on Aerodrome, a VE33 DEX. And so, if it were not for the January and February pump as a result of Coinbase announcing their investment in Aerodrome, that was from back in 2024. If it were not for that big pump, I don't think the Aero token would ever have pumped, because these VE33 reward tokens suck. Like, they're super inflationary. Take a look at Black, the Black Hole token. So we're looking for Black. There we go. I want Black. Black USDT, the Black Hole token, Black Hole protocol, Black USD, Black Hole USD, spot crypto. Is that going to give it to me? Awesome. So this token, and I'm looking at a daily Black Hole protocol. Is this TVL? I think this might actually be TVL here. I want to see if I can bring up just the chart of this thing. Black, and I want to look at crypto and not Kraken, all of it. Black protocol. I'm just looking for Black Hole, spot crypto. Okay, so this is about what you should expect from a token like this, one of these VE33 DEX tokens. You should expect a pattern that looks just like this. And this is exactly what Aerodrome's token looked like before Coinbase announced their investment. So I was trading on Aerodrome the week it launched. I think that was like the third week of August of 2023. I was trading the week it launched, and their Aero token looked exactly like Black, did nothing but move lower. Nothing but move lower. That's all it did. And I expect Black to move even lower, like 3 cents. Why 3 cents? Why not 1 cent? Why not 0.3 of 1 cent? Like this should just continue to move lower. And that is exactly what Arrow did too, until that Coinbase announcement. And then all of a sudden the thing pumped. So I expect Arrow, the Arrow token, if you just take a look at a level of support for Arrow, it's really, look, like right there, 28 cents. That's the Binance flash crash low, some support right there. Get back down there, that would be the third test. And if it doesn't hold, then, you got to start thinking about like less than 10 cents for Arrow. So, and this token is worthless. It does nothing. There's no reason to hold it. It's inflationary. It's a DEX reward token. It's part of their scheme. It's no reason for it. If you want to provide liquidity, go to Uniswap or go to like Meteora or something on Solana. Don't go to Aerodrome. You don't want that Arrow token. No one does. It's just nonsense. So I think this probably goes down to 28 cents. And I would be a seller of it even at 28 cents. So yeah, that's what I got for you guys today. And I am looking forward to some more downside out of Bitcoin, because as Bitcoin gets closer to this 80K level, if that 80K level breaks, we might see a sharp flush out down to 75. And that would be buyable, I think. You could buy the balance at 75. Depends on what the S&P and NASDAQ are doing, though. If there's actually, more than just like a dip, like a blip lower out of the S&P and the NASDAQ, if we actually get vol bid, then maybe we see a sharp flush out in crypto. But if this dip just gets bought, like every other dip has been bought in the past from equities, then, maybe the downside out of crypto is limited, at least down to like maybe 80K on Bitcoin. So I hope that this has been valuable for you guys. I certainly have enjoyed, going through all of these charts and talking markets. And I will see you guys tomorrow during the next live technical analysis market wrap. Everyone have a great evening. See you then.